The assassination of Jon Snow was the climax of season 5, and this season we wanted to start right where we left off, with his body lying motionless in the snow at Castle Black.
I don't think there's a whole lot of question about who did this and why. This was a very clear power grab.
Who killed him?
I did. Bowen Marsh and Othel Yarwick and the other officers in this castle.
Thorin and Jon Snow have never gotten along, and it got to the point in season 1 where they came very close to coming to blows, and Alliser was conspiring against him from that point on. And it's a little bit like the assassination of Julius Caesar, where there were quite a few men involved in the conspiracy who all probably genuinely thought they were doing the best thing for the Roman Republic.
He thrust a terrible choice upon us, and we made it.
We're never going to fix what's wrong with this city from the top of an 800-foot pyramid.
Tyrion's very much in a situation, along with Varys, where they're sitting on a volatile powder keg of a society.
Fear has brought Meereen to a standstill. Whoever you are, wherever you go, someone in this city wants to murder you.
The enemies of Daenerys see a city ripe to be overthrown, and it's going to test Tyrion's political skills, his diplomatic skills, all of his experience.
He's optimistic in a strange way for him. He's not generally an optimistic person, but I think he feels inspired for the first time, and he feels equal to the challenge that's facing him when it comes to Meereen.
The Sons of the Harpy take orders from someone.
Have you started looking for that someone?
Your Grace, I'm sorry to disturb you. A ship from Dawn has sailed into the harbor. Marcella.
It has been a rough couple of months for Cersei Lannister. She's still embarrassed and shamed, and then she gets word that her daughter's ship, the ship from Dorne, has arrived, so it's for the first time in a long time, it's some good news. She can finally see her beloved Marcella again.
But I think when she sees Jaime's face and she sees what's behind Jaime under the shroud in that boat, that's the lowest point she's ever reached.
One of the things that we always loved about Cersei, and particularly about Lena Headey's interpretation of Cersei, is that she's not an evil witch whose function in life is to perform evil. She's a human being, and one thing everyone has to admit about Cersei is that Cersei loves her children.
What's happened to her is almost all she can take. The fact that she's got another child left, that and Jaime are the only things keeping her from complete despair.
We're the only ones who matter, the only ones in this world. And everything they've taken from us, we're going to take back and more.
There have been a few hints before that Melisandre is much older than she appears. Going back to a very early conversation with George Martin about her, she's supposed to be several centuries old. So we always wanted to show her true age, and we're waiting for the right moment. And this was it for us.
Her confronting the reality of her situation, her appearance is a lie, just as the Lord of Light's supposed promises to her and messages to her were lies. At the end of episode 1, she's in a place where she really needs to look her real self in the eye and come to terms with where she stands now.
And we see the real Melisandre, which is quite feeble and aged, and yet you can see her in there.
Last we saw Bran was the end of season 4, and we knew that he was heading into a very new phase of his life, one in which he was being trained for something. We didn't quite know what he was being trained for, but when we first see him in the second episode of this season, we jump right in, and now we're really seeing him not only able to walk through the world, but him being able to walk through his own past and the past of his family.
When we started working on the show, we did not want to do flashbacks because oftentimes it seems like a hallmark of kind of lazy storytelling. But that said, you know, the history of this world is so important to understanding the world and to understanding why the characters are motivated as they are and to where they're headed. So one of the things that we really loved about this storyline with Bran is the ability to go into the past, not as a flashback, but we're seeing it from the perspective of a character that we know, and we're seeing how that character reacts to it. So it's not just us seeing Winterfell back when Ned Stark was a young boy, but also watching Bran see his father, younger than he is now, sparring with his own brother. And it's just, for us, became all of a sudden much more interesting and compelling.
It is time to go.
Please, a little longer.
It's an amazing, enticing prospect for Bran, but it's also dangerous, as the Three-Eyed Raven points out. It really needs to be doled out in doses because the temptation for Bran is to never come back.
You finally show me something I care about, and then you drag me away.
It is beautiful beneath the sea. But if you stay too long, you'll drown.
If you acquire a reputation as a mad dog, you'll be treated as a mad dog. Taken out back and slaughtered for pig feed.
My lords, Lady Walder has given birth. A boy.
Certainly from the time that Ramsay heard that Roost's new wife was pregnant, he knew there was a threat to his ascendancy. And from that moment on, Ramsay knows that his position's in jeopardy because he might be a naturalized Bolton, but whatever child Roose has with Walda is going to be a natural born, from the get-go, a legitimate Bolton. So that starts to make Ramsay nervous. And beyond all that, one thing he certainly learned from his father is that if you have a chance to seize power, you seize it. Then there's no time like the present.
You'll always be my firstborn.
Thank you for saying that. It means a great deal to me.
It was certainly not something that was just a spur-of-the-moment decision. In fact, we see that when we see young Lord Karstark watching it, he's not surprised by what's happened, so he's clearly in on it. Ramsay learned certain things from his father. He certainly learned ruthlessness. The one thing about Roose, though, is that Roose planned everything very carefully, and he understood the importance of alliances. Ramsay's being a bit more incautious because the Bolton hold on the north is precarious, and much of it is due to Roose's efforts. So by assassinating Roose, Ramsay is inheriting a quite difficult job and being Warden of the North in a region where many of the families despise your family and consider them traitors.
I'm not asking the Lord of Light for help. I'm asking the woman who showed me that miracles exist.
I never had this gift.
Have you ever tried?
Davos has no real love lost for Melisandre. He is not a huge fan of hers. When they were both serving Stannis, they were always the angel and the devil on Stannis' opposite shoulders. He's seen what she's capable of. He's seen her do many impossible things. He's not a big fan of her god. He's not a big fan of her program, but there's certainly nothing to lose at this point. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work.
For Melisandre, she comes into it with grave doubts. I mean, she was someone who was a true believer, whose faith was shaken, someone who was an absolute devotee of the Lord of Light, and the events of the last many episodes have shaken that faith, but she still believes in him. She just doesn't know if he believes in her. And so she comes to Jon Snow's body with the tiniest hope that maybe if she says the right words, if she says them with enough belief, with enough passion, the Lord will listen to her.
En sindroro onios, en kir persis, en morchot gleisum. Please.
Well, first, Melisandre believes she's failed, and that's what Tormund believes. I think he's the first to walk out. That's what Ed believes. And Davos finally gives up. It's kind of like you're applying the paddles to the patient who suffered cardiac arrest, and the paddles don't work. It was the last-ditch thing, but we can't get a pulse back, and he's gone. And then, Ghost, he's known Jon longer than any of these people have. And all these wolves have a strange and deep connection with their Stark counterparts. So Ghost has a kind of sixth sense when it comes to Jon Snow and when Jon's in danger and when he might be coming back.
Sir Arthur Dane.
The sword of the morning.
Father said he was the best swordsman he ever saw.
One of the best things about being able to go back with Bran and look at the past is to be able to see the discrepancy between the received history, the things that everybody knows about the things that happened, and what actually happened.
Every kid who grows up in Westeros, they all hear about this legendary sword fight that took place 20 years ago, and as far as Bran knew, it's just his father beat this legendary guy.
And now it begins. No. Now it ends.
honor is a kind of wished-for state amongst certain members of the society who want to be the best possible versions of themselves, and they want to live and die bravely and fighting, you know, with this according to a certain code. And certainly Ned embodied that better than anyone we've seen, I think, on the show.
He's better than my father.
Far better.
My father beat him.
Did he?
But one thing to remember about this fight is this is at the end of a long rebellion in which Ned and Howland have seen many thousands of people die due to the insanity of the Mad King, who these Kingsguard are sworn to follow.
So honor was so important to Ned Stark that it was worth losing his own life for, but he was completely ready to let go of that honor and excellence to do something that he really felt was more important. It could make a very, very strong defense for Ned doing what he did, but it certainly does puncture the mythology of Ned Stark that's running through this world, especially after his death. I think when Dany returns to Vaes Dothrak, it's obviously with a certain sense of dread, because she knows that these widows of the former Khals are not likely to welcome her with open arms. It's not like, oh, long-lost sister, where have you been? It's, here's a funny-looking, white-haired girl who has put herself on record as thinking she's all that and stringing a bunch of highfalutin titles after her name. But the High Priestess of the Dosh Khaleen is not coming at it from the perspective of somebody who's looking to punish this young person with inflated ideas of her own greatness. I think she remembers what it was like to think that a glorious destiny awaited her and to find out that that wasn't the case. I think the High Priestess has a certain amount of empathy with Dany's position that you see in the way she relates to her, which is stern, but not quite as awful as anybody might have expected it to be. Jon coming back to life was something that the first version we wrote originally had more talking. And as we saw it on the page written out, we realized it was just too much dialogue. We decided to just give the kind of awe of that moment its due.
We're talking about the idea that you do lose something and that you're forever changed. Not in the supernatural way. I mean, he's still Jon, but he's been dead. That is a haunting experience, because if that really is what's beyond, and what's beyond is nothing, just the terror of knowing that.
What do you remember?
They stabbed me. I shouldn't be here.
To remember your own death and yet be sitting here and seeing evidence of what happened to you on your own body, that is existentially terrifying.
It's learning how to live with the memory of being murdered, which is the experience of absolutely no one in this world.
I did what I thought was right, and I got murdered for it. And now I'm back. Why?
It's a fascinating thing because we've been watching these characters now for 6 seasons, and this is the first scene they've had together. 2 of the most important characters on the show, and they've never been together on camera before. It just worked out beautifully.
The idea that after all Jon and Sansa had been through as characters, that they're finally able to put a foot back on solid ground in terms of family and somebody with whom they have a bond that runs deeper than any other bond. It was a big moment for the 2 of them, and for us to see it played out.
And to learn where these 2 are going to go with a relationship that never really meant that much to either one of them before, but now means so much because at this point they're all that they have.
They both suffered so much, and they've both been through so much, and it's interesting to see the different directions that their individual sufferings have taken them.
Can't stay here, not after what happened.
There's only one place we can go. Home.
Or should we tell the Boltons to pack up and leave?
We'll take it back from them.
John's just not ready to get back into the fight. Since he left Winterfell, it's been essentially one long fight against everyone possible. He fought as hard as he possibly could, and then he was killed. And so he just wants out.
It's really only the additional pull of family and finding out that Rickon Stark is still alive that forces his hand and pulls him back into this fray he was trying to step away from.
A monster has taken our home and our brother. We have to go back to Winterfell and save them both.
He has to do the right thing. That's what makes him Jon Snow, and that's why we love him, and that's why he gets himself killed.
We enter these negotiations with open eyes. Trust me, my own recent experience with slavery has taught me the horrors of that institution.
How many days were you a slave?
Long enough to know.
Not long enough to understand.
One of the historical examples that we looked to when writing these scenes was, oddly enough, was Abe Lincoln, because Abe Lincoln was trying desperately to stave off a civil war between the North and the South, and he wasn't ready to get rid of slavery quite as quickly as people think. I mean, he was trying to talk to the Southerners and work out some kind of compromise at first. And, you know, with Tyrion, it's, as he says to Grey Worm Missandei, slavery is an evil, war is an evil, and I can't end both at once. So what's the solution here? The whole point of diplomacy is compromise.
Here is the Queen's proposal. Instead of abolishing slavery overnight, we will give you 7 years to end the practice. In exchange, you will cut off your support for the Sons of the Harpy.
His proposed compromise, which he thinks of as a good idea, is incredibly offensive to Missandei and Grey Worm, who were slaves. And, you know, from their point of view, you don't make a compromise with slavers because that's making a deal with the devil. So they're entering into these negotiations with the slavers with deep skepticism, but Daenerys did choose this man to advise her, so if he's saying there's a chance, they're willing to try it, but with grave suspicions.
You will not use them. They will use you. That is what they do.
Vos mana vos hal. Ane voka ki yeri. Vos ma an have drek. Machin an have nok.
One of the things that was interesting for us is, you know, seeing how Dany can be strong when she's not in a position of power. You know, all the calls of all the gathered Khalasars were within the Temple of Dashkaleen, and Dany, an unarmed little woman, killed them all by herself. You know, she didn't have a dragon fly in and do it. It was all Dany.
The end of episode 604 was definitely meant consciously to echo the end of episode 110. It's Dany stepping out of a flame to great effect. This time it was just on a much, much larger scale.
Rebirth is clearly a theme this season, you know, whether it's Jon Snow or Dany emerging again from the fires. When she did it the first time, only, you know, a few score people witnessed this miracle of Daenerys Targaryen emerging unscathed from the flames. Now it's the Dothraki as a people who witnessed this.
The act of stepping out of that burning temple in which all the Dothraki power structure had just perished pretty much makes her the queen of the Dothraki in one fell swoop.
And of course, it's hard not to be impressed when you see her emerging from the fires unscathed. It's like a god being reborn, and that's why they all bow to her.
You have no idea how happy I am to see you unharmed.
Unharmed? What are you doing here?
Sansa's gotten pretty good at playing the game. When she sees Littlefinger, though, it's not about politics. It's not about trying to manipulate him or anything. He betrayed her in the worst possible way. And so in her mind, everything that happened after that, he's to blame for it.
You freed me from the monsters who murdered my family. And you gave me to other monsters who murdered my family.
You want me to beg for my life? I will.
I think it goes through her mind how satisfying it would be to see Brienne just cut him in two right here. But she doesn't, and that she doesn't is an interesting quality of Sansa's, that she started to look a couple moves ahead, and she started to think, is it possible this person will be more useful to me alive than dead?
I didn't know the Tullys still had an army.
My uncle, the Blackfish, has reformed it and retaken River Run.
How'd you know that?
It's funny because even as she's trying to make a clean break with Littlefinger, Sansa is showing us the ways in which Littlefinger has shaped her way of looking at the world.
Ramsay received a raven before I escaped Winterfell.
I mean, the decision not to tell Jon about the meeting with Littlefinger, not to tell Jon how she knows about the Blackfish. If she really trusted Jon and she really was coming at this as a clean, pure Stark, she would tell the truth to her brother and the person to whom she has real allegiance at this point. But for whatever reason, she holds back on that. And I think that shows that Littlefinger still has some kind of a hold on Sansa.
I am Theon Greyjoy, last living son of Balon Greyjoy. And she is your rightful ruler.
It's probably unique in the history of the Iron Islands for a male heir to reject his own claim in favor of his sister. It's one thing to say when it's just the two of them, I don't want to be king, you should be. It's quite another thing when they have the King's Moot and they're actually choosing a king. And that's, I think, when she first really begins to trust him again.
I'm Euron Greyjoy. I claim the Salt Throne.
Of course, the person who precipitated the King's Moot by throwing his own brother off a bridge did so with full understanding of what a King's Moot was. It's an election, and Euron Greyjoy was confident that he could step into that situation and triumph through force of personality and through violence if necessary.
There are certain symbols and patterns that recur throughout the show. The first time we saw that was in one of the very first scenes in the pilot, when Will, the ranger, sees the wildling body parts in an odd pattern displayed by the White Walkers. We see it again north of the wall with the dead horses displayed in a spiral pattern. And then you see it again here and learn where these patterns come from, that there are ancient symbols of the children of the forest used in their rituals, and the children of the forest created the White Walkers.
The Night King, who's sort of the embodiment of absolute evil. What you're watching is the creation of this absolute evil. So the absolute evil isn't absolute after all.
No one's innocent, really, in this world. And there was just something really beautifully right about the idea that the great nemesis of mankind were created to protect the children of the forest from mankind. The cave is a safe place. You know, it's like you're playing tag, and if your hand's on the wall, you're safe from whoever's it. And it is the Night King, and he can't access them as long as they're in there because of the magic that's protecting this cave. But Bran makes a mistake.
He saw me!
He's not the Three-Eyed Raven yet. He doesn't have control over these visions in the way that the Three-Eyed Raven does. But for the first time, someone actually sees him in the vision as the Night King. Which is part of the tragic mistake here, is that if the Three-Eyed Raven had been with him, things would have ended much differently.
The time has come.
The time for what?
For you to become me.
But am I ready?
No.
As soon as the Three-Eyed Raven realizes there is no more time, he's got to try to upload all this knowledge into Bran.
This is happening much, much more rapidly than he thought it was going to happen. And he doesn't really know what it all means. He doesn't know what to make of it all because it's happening under duress.
Hold the door! Hold the door!
We had this meeting with George Martin, where we're trying to get as much information as possible out of him, and probably the most shocking revelation he had for us was when he told us the origin of Hodor, how that name came about. I just remember Dan and I looking at each other when he said that and just being like, holy shit.
Hold the door! Hold the door! Hold the door! Hold the door!
It was just one of the saddest and most affecting things. Even sitting in a hotel room and having somebody tell you that this was going to happen in the abstract in some way, and that Hold the Door was the origin of the name Hodor. We just thought that was a really, really heartbreaking idea.
Hodor! 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 Hodor!
Episode 6 picks up almost immediately on the heels of episode 5. Bran is being dragged on a sledge and chased by whites. He opens his eyes and he's in shock.
Mira, they found us.
Hodor's heroic sacrifice bought them some time, but it hasn't set them free. I mean, they're still in grave danger.
Mira is just hoping against hope that she's going to be able to save Bran's life, and of course, she is unable to do that without a little bit of help.
Come with me, now.
Benjamin was so important in the early episodes. He's an important character who just disappears. It's one of the mysteries that's been out there for several seasons, and we've been looking forward to bringing him back.
The White Walker stabbed me in the gut with a sword of ice. His children found me. Stopped the Walker's magic from taking hold. A shard of dragon glass plunged into your heart.
Cold Hands Benjen obviously had a lot to do with the Three-Eyed Raven over the past several years since his disappearance, and he's got a bit of a window into Bran's purpose.
You are the Three-Eyed Raven, no? I didn't have time to learn. I can't control anything.
Bran had to absorb the history of the world, the entire history of the world in imagery.
Burn them all!
They talk about the Three-Eyed Raven. It's not just a title that you get. There's a part of him that's no longer Brandon Stark, but is the Three-Eyed Raven, and the Three-Eyed Raven is not, entirely human.
You must learn to control it before the Night King comes. You will be there waiting for him. And you will be ready.
Drink long and deep, my noble king, from this cup of sweet wine.
We were excited to do the play within the play, and it's a distorted funhouse mirror representation of things we've already seen.
Poison! Murder!
Part of Arya's amusement is just that she knows they're getting so many details wrong, but she always regretted that she didn't have a chance to watch Joffrey die. And now she gets to. It's obviously a comic version of it, but that gives her great pleasure.
Arya is kind of slowly getting seduced by these performances, and Lady Crane, the actress she's charged with killing, this is somebody who, like her, has taken as her life's work the job of becoming other people. When Arya is looking in the mirror and she's trying to decide who she is and what she is, and is she actually the kind of person who can do this killing, knowing full well that if she fails in this task, as Jaqen told her, one way or another, another face will be added to the wall. Implication is it's her face or it's your face.
She's killed plenty of people before, but there were always people who were either people she hated or people who were in her way. In this case, she's assassinating someone who she actually likes.
You have very expressive eyes, Mercy. Wonderful eyebrows. Do you like pretending to be other people?
The decision to shatter the glass before it reaches Lady Crane's lips means not just that she's going to be kicked out of the House of Black and White, but there's no coming back. Her chances of survival now have just grown very slim.
Wait here.
Daenerys talks about the dragons being her children, and that the dragons are the only children she'll have. Of her 3 children, she's always been closest to Drogon, and they clearly have some kind of connection that goes beyond words, and she just senses that he's out there in this scene. One of our favorite moments from season 1 was watching Khal Drogo deliver a speech to his gathered Khalasar. That speech clearly lingered in Daenerys' mind, and she's echoing almost the exact same language when she's talking to the Dothraki now. So she's basically telling them the promise that one of the great calls had made years before, and saying that now's the time to live up to that promise and to fulfill it. It's something that's been set up for quite a long time, and now we're seeing it come to pass.
How many men did it take to cut you down?
Just one.
Oh. He must have been some kind of monster.
He was a woman.
I think suffering a near-death experience probably changes anyone, and that certainly has changed Sandor Clegane. He's a more thoughtful person than he was when we last saw him. He's probably more aware of his vulnerabilities. He knows how close he came to dying, and he's really thinking about his past in a way that he never had before.
Never too late to stop robbing people, to stop killing people, start helping people. It's never too late to come back.
You can feel the very subtle effect that Ray and his community are having on the Hound, and he's starting to see that there's perhaps a different way of living your life.
What are you doing here?
Well, we're talking about life. You?
Protecting the people.
The unfortunate, ugly reality is that the kind of pacifism that Ray is preaching is often suicidal when you're in the middle of the kind of world that they're all in. Something sad about the fact that this person who tried desperately to walk away from what he was is being given no real choice but to go full throttle back in the direction of what he really is, which is a killer.
This isn't your fight. You shouldn't have to come to Winterfell with me. I shouldn't be asking you. I need you with me if we're gonna beat them, and we need to beat them if you're gonna survive.
Jon is not a wildling. Jon grew up in a castle raised by a noble father, but Jon has a much easier time with the kind of plain talk that the people north of the Wall resonate with.
He died for us. If we are not willing to do the same for him, we deserve to be the last of the free folk.
These wildlings that he's convincing are people whose lives he's saved. They're people who've seen the same things he's seen. They are reticent to follow anyone, especially a non-wildling, but they're all smart enough and practical enough to realize that the old rules that governed their existence for hundreds of years are no longer in effect.
No.
So he does a very good job convincing them, but he has a harder time with Lady Mormont.
I served under your uncle at Castle Black. I was his steward. In fact,
I think we've had enough small talk. Why are you here?
We were excited about the prospect of the character, because she's mentioned in passing in the previous season.
Do you know this wretched girl? Lyanna Mormont.
The Lord Commander's niece.
Lady of Bear Island. And a child of 10.
The more we thought about it, Jon is going to come up against so many old guys with beards in the north that, like, what if she was a tougher audience? It seemed like an inherently fun scene to watch. It also is terrifying because it's putting a lot of dramatic weight on the shoulders of somebody who needs to be very young. And we're very lucky to have found Bella because she is doing such a great job of just talking smack to these guys who are used to being the heroes who make proclamations.
What you have to understand, my lady, is that...
I understand that I'm responsible for Bear Island and all who live here. So why should I sacrifice one more Mormont life for someone else's war?
I'll never hurt you, little brother. Don't you know that?
Yara does love Theon, and one could argue that she's the only one who's ever really loved him. Yara's always been there for him. She's the only person who tried to rescue him when he was Ramsay's prisoner.
I know you've had some bad years.
Bad years?
But I'm tired of watching you cower like a beat dog. Drink the goddamn ale.
It's a very tough love, though. You know, Yara's not a therapist in our kind of sense of the word. She's not there to, you know, tell him to buck up and everything's going to be okay.
If you're so broken that there's no coming back, take a knife and cut your wrists. End it.
It's a pretty brutal kind of therapy, but that's who they are. I mean, they're essentially a Viking people. There's not a lot of room for sort of soft and gentle psychology. I think it's the kind of tough love that Theon needed at this point. And when he finally raises his eyes and looks into her eyes, we see a glimpse of the old Theon that had been lost for so long.
The Crown has decided that from this day forward, trial by combat will be forbidden throughout the Seven Kingdoms.
This moment is a grievous blow for Cersei because she's been counting on trial by combat really since the end of season 5. This was always her ace in the hole. The Mountain was never going to lose a trial by combat. There's no one out there who could beat him. And then Tommen takes it away from her. And knowing really what he's doing, he might be a weak king, but he's not an idiot. You know, he understands that this move is to mean that she's probably not going to fare that well in this trial. So it's a pretty devastating moment for Cersei, and you see that in her reaction, and partly because it's just bodes so ill for this coming trial, and partly because it's her own son who's really betrayed her.
7 blessings, Swole.
You know, he's in a tough position where he has to do what he thinks is right, and unfortunately for Cersei, what he thinks is right in this moment is doing something which is very much against Cersei's interests.
My name is Brienne of Tarth. Please inform Sir Jaime Lannister I've come to speak with him.
Jaime didn't expect to see Brienne necessarily ever again. He certainly didn't expect to see her marching into his military camp. And his relationship with her is obviously very complicated and fraught and has undercurrents that he's uncomfortable with feeling.
You gave it to me for a purpose. I have achieved that purpose.
Giving her the Valyrian steel sword was no small thing. There are probably like 10 of these things in the world.
It's yours. It will always be yours.
He's given it to her, not to carry out one task or for one stretch of time, but for the rest of her life. I think that's a symbolic, meaningful gesture on his part. And yet, here she's honor-bound to point out that they're not on the same side in this fight, and that if it turns to a real fight, they may end up having to actually fight one another.
It's these two who are not quite sure of how they feel about the other, and he lets her go. You know, he'd be well within his rights to send his men after her to capture her, and it wouldn't be that hard to capture her since she's being slowly rowed away by Podrick, but he doesn't. She might technically be an enemy now that she's serving Sansa Stark, who is still obviously a suspect in Joffrey's murder, but she's not Jaime's enemy. So he's letting her go, and she knows that he's letting her go, and you know, who knows if they'll ever see each other again.
Arya is in danger. She's got an open wound in her stomach, and the one person who has protected her to this point, unfortunately, gets murdered.
The many-faced god was promised a name. He must always receive what is his. And now he's been promised another name.
The fact that the many-faced god gets the people who have been promised to him really makes you think that there's just almost an inevitability about what happens to people who run afoul of the Faceless Men, as Arya has done.
It will all be over soon.
Getting to the final part of the sequence, Arya's telling Jaqen by putting the face on the wall that this account is settled and we're good here and now I'm gonna walk away, and I think she knows what the answer is gonna be.
Finally, a girl is no one.
The implication is obviously that Jaqen on some level was rooting for the outcome that he got. He may be no one, but there's still enough of a person left in him to respect and admire who this girl is and what she's become. Arya finally tells us something that we've kind of known all along. She's not no one, she's Arya Stark of Winterfell.
Despite appearances, I think you'll find the city's on the rise.
The city's on the rise?
The people are behind you. Well, not all the people, of course.
Daenerys, when she comes back to that situation, she has no idea what to expect. She doesn't know what's happened in Meereen. In a way, you feel for Tyrion because she left him with a terrible situation. The city that was under siege from within and without, and he really did, for so long, such an excellent job of making things better there, and unfortunately what she comes back to find is exactly what she would have expected to find when she left. And the fact that she has a city at all still is due to him.
Good. Shall we begin?
Do we have a plan?
I think Dany's been becoming a Targaryen ever since the end of season 1.
She's not her father, and she's not insane, and she's not a sadist, but there's a Targaryen ruthlessness that comes with even the good Targaryens.
Your reign is over.
My reign has just begun.
If you're one of the lords of Westeros, or one of her potential opponents in the wars to come, and you get word of what happened here in Meereen, you have to be pretty nervous because this is an unprecedented threat. You've got a woman who has somehow formed an alliance where she's got a Dothraki horde, a legion of Unsullied, she's got the mercenary army of the Second Sons, and she's got 3 dragons who are now pretty close to full grown. So if she can make it all the way across the Narrow Sea and get to Westeros, who's going to stand in her way?
I've defended the wall from worse than Ramsay Bolt.
You don't know him.
All right, tell me. What should we do? How do we get Rickon back?
I think Sansa's frustrated here because she knows Ramsay better than any of them do. There's no way Ramsay's gonna let him survive because Rickon is a threat to Ramsay's legitimacy as Warden of the North. He's a true-born Stark. There's no possible outcome where this ends well for Rickon.
From the beginning, we knew that one thing we'd never had on the show was a true medieval pitched battle, where 2 sides bring all the forces they can into play in some battlefield that's somehow negotiated or agreed upon, and they go at each other until one of them wins and the other one loses. This is a staple of human history, and we started to look through film examples of it. There really wasn't one that both made you feel what it was like to be there on the ground and gave you a sense of the geography of the battle.
Just to feel the kind of randomness of it where there's arrows falling from everywhere, people are getting killed, people are getting trampled by horses, and so much of it's just luck. Jon Snow is a very skilled combatant, but part of the reason he survives this battle is just he gets lucky.
We went back to the Roman fight against the Carthaginians in the Battle of Cannae, where the Romans got caught in an encirclement by Hannibal and just slaughtered to the man. And we used that as sort of our model.
The Battle of the Bastards becomes incredibly compact, and all these men, all these combatants crammed into this incredibly tight space on the battlefield. You read accounts of battles in the Civil War where the bodies were piled so thick it actually became an obstruction on the battlefield. Even for someone we love as much as Jon, just something so dehumanizing about it. Even his look, he's so covered in blood and soot. There's like a wildness to him, especially after what he's seen. There's just no part of Jon that's not going to pursue.
The initial version of the battle all took place on the battlefield, but it was the battle for Winterfell. As we talked it through, it started to occur to us that the episode is really about bringing things home for Jon, have him fight for his home in his home.
deeply good human being, but he'd push anyone beyond their limits and they snap.
There's nothing he wants more than to beat Ramsay to death with his own fists. And then he sees his sister, who suffered at the hands of this man, and he realizes that this person is not his to finish.
Sansa. Hello, Sansa.
The show doesn't always give people the things that are gonna make them happy, but this felt like a moment where it made narrative sense that they would win this fight and that Ramsay would come into their possession as a prisoner.
Is this where I'll be staying now?
I don't think Ramsay realizes it's over until he wakes up in the chair. I think he's crafty enough and he's always managed to get away with everything. I think he's still hopeful that there might be some way he can connive his way out of this one too, until the very, very end.
My hounds will never harm me.
You haven't fed them in 7 days, you said it yourself.
His dogs were such a thing for him in this season and in seasons past, and such an extension of his own horrible urges, and the idea that they would be turned against him and that it would happen at Sansa's hands made a lot of sense to us.
Stop! Stop! Stop!
This isn't the little girl who wanted to dress up like a princess anymore. Her walk away at the end of the scene, and that's one of my favorite shots we've ever had. It's just the little ghost of a smile on her face. She's in Winterfell, but she's not the person she was when she first left.
I'm ready. I have to go. I'm late for the trial.
At this point in the story, you're trying to kind of play with the pieces that we've got on the board. The wildfire was something that we had on the board. We knew from Jaime's conversation with Brienne that there was wildfire under the city. We know from episode 2 that there was wildfire under the city. Everything that Olenna says about Cersei earlier in the season is true, that she's got no more friends left. She has no more power left. Olenna asks her point blank, "What, are you gonna kill everyone yourself?" It's possible that she puts an idea in Cersei's head, or at least augments an idea that's already been in Cersei's head.
By the time that Lancel Lannister gets down there and sees that there is this massive catacomb and something suspicious is going on, I think you've got to start wondering, what the hell is this plot?
You see Marjorie's realizing slowly, horribly, like what is actually happening here.
Cersei understands the consequences of her absence, and she is absent anyway, which means she does not intend to suffer those consequences.
It's all been building up to this moment, and then, boom. She's really achieved a stunning, very surprising victory against everybody who's opposing her all at once. Meanwhile, while this is happening, Tommen's alone. This fragile, malleable, devastated child, basically, is sitting there without anybody to comfort him, and if she had been there, he wouldn't have gone out that window. She failed him, and she alone failed him here.
I think the idea of Cersei without her children is a pretty terrifying prospect, because it was the one thing that really humanized her, you know, her love for her kids. And as much of a monster as she could sometimes be, she was a mother who truly did love her children. And now those children are gone, and all she's got is power, and she's got a lot of it. I mean, she's the queen. She's sitting on the Iron Throne. I don't think that bodes well for anyone, really. And I think, you know, even for Jaime, who loves her, I think it's a terrifying moment. She's capable of doing anything, as she's proven in this episode, to get what she wants. And the real question now is, what does she want? Sansa. She does love her brother, you know, and they've had a conflicted past.
I'm not a Stark.
You are to me.
Over the course of this season, they've come to really rely upon each other, but she doesn't necessarily trust him completely. You know, she didn't tell him about the meeting with Littlefinger. She didn't tell him that she summoned the Knights of the Vale. There's definitely like a little hint of conflict there. We see that come out in episode 9, where she's, you know, at the War Council, where no one asks her opinion, despite the fact that she knows Ramsay better than anyone. So I think there's a little bit of anger about that, and a little bit of jealousy, and you know, that relationship will be crucial to watch.
You're the Lady of Winterfell. You deserve it. We're standing here because of you. The battle was lost until the Knights of the Vale rode in. They came because of you.
When we see the second King in the North scene with Jon, I think it was important to us that it evoked that first King in the North scene.
The King in the North! The King in the North!
It's very different circumstances, different environment. They're at Winterfell instead of, you know, military encampment.
We know no king, but the king in the north whose name is Stark. I don't care if he's a bastard. Ned Stark's blood runs through his veins. He's my king, from this day until his last day.
The king in the north! The king in the north!
In some ways, the evocation of the first one is meant to be a little bit worrisome because, you know, it was a very triumphant moment when Robb is named King in the North, but it didn't go so well for the previous King in the North. So I think we have to be a little worried for Jon. And at the same time, you know, it's a pretty big reversal, and you know, for a character who was dead at the beginning of the season to be declared king at the end of it, he's done well. He's done well in 10 short episodes. Arya is someone whose path has been very dark, and yet I think we all see where she's coming from. I mean, she's seen the Stark family endure so many atrocities, and she wants vengeance. In some ways, it's the cleanest narrative of them all. Well, this is a scene we've been looking forward to for quite some time. Her return to Westeros and her revenge upon Walder Frey.
For House Frey!
My name is Arya Stark. I want you to know that. The last thing you're ever going to see is a Stark smiling down at you as you die.
It's a worrisome narrative for Arya, because, you know, she started as this little girl who was always tough and plucky and whatnot, but, you know, she's become a murderer, you know, and a highly skilled murderer. And even if the murders are justifiable, it's still, we've witnessed the descent of this girl into someone who's capable of slitting a man's throat and kind of smiling as she watches him bleed out. So that's, you know, I don't think anyone's going to be crying over the fate of Walder Frey, but it's still, if you love Arya, you have to be a little bit worried about where she goes from here.
Tyrion had a very steep slope to climb to win Dany's trust. His family played an integral part in nearly exterminating her family. But at this point, especially given the hand he was dealt with Meereen after she left, has earned her trust. One of the few people in the world at this point who's willing to speak the truth to her face.
Mainly, he's proven himself to be very loyal. You know, she's gone for most of the season, but he didn't abandon her. He didn't go off looking for the next person to rule. I mean, he was clearly trying to serve her interests while she was gone. Dany's not going to do anything she doesn't want to do. She's not going to take anyone's advice if it seems against her interests. And so when he recommends that she cut ties with Dario, she does it because she thinks he's right. The truth is, Tyrion's logic makes a lot of sense to her. You know, he's not going to be a help for her when she gets to Westeros. She comes over there unencumbered, and as a queen without a king, that could be really useful in the future.
Who are you marrying this time?
I don't know.
You know, Tyrion has become a very capable advisor in a relatively short time. She clearly respects his intelligence, and she now respects his loyalty. I think, especially given that she knows where they're heading. They're going back to Westeros. Most of the people on her team have never been there, but Tyrion spent his whole life there, served as Hand of the King before, defended King's Landing during an attack.
I'd swear you're my sword, but I don't actually own a sword.
It's your counsel I need.
He knows these families, the ruling families, better than anyone. He certainly knows Cersei better than anyone. So as long as she can trust him, which she does, he's the perfect advisor to her in the war for He's the perfect hand to the queen, and that's why she names him such.
That shot of Dany's fleet with all of her newly arrayed allies making its way out of the Slaver's Bay towards the Narrow Sea and home, probably the biggest single thing that's happened on the show thus far. It's the thing we've been waiting for since the pilot episode of the first season. The person she is now is very, very different from the person she was then. It hasn't been a smooth road. Feels like she has earned it at this point.
It's the shot that we're going to leave everyone with.
But it was a real thrill to see her on the bow of that ship with Tyrion by her side heading west. It's a ruthlessness that comes with even the good Targaryens. I mean, these are the people who came over from across the Narrow Sea and conquered the known world. It'd be very interesting to see how that plays out going forward.
Daenerys begins season 6 lost. She's been traveling for a huge amount of time. There's only so much energy she has left. She has no idea what's waiting for her. They could decide to just kill her at any point, and she's trying to muster up a plan. She's trying to kind of get her bearings and keep quiet, because she knows that her best weapon is to simply glean as much information as possible.
Having Daenerys being brought to me when he first sees her, and I think that's pure lust.
Her choice to confront Khal Morrow is much more of a desperate times situation. Daenerys has given him some talk back, not necessarily to change his mind entirely, but to just show him what she's made of. And he's intrigued by this white-haired witch.
I think he's a man of honor and of tradition, and he soon finds out that she's Dosh Khaleen. She actually uses it to her advantage.
So a Khal chooses to marry a Khaleesi. If the Khal dies, that Khaleesi then becomes part of the Dosh Khaleen, which are kind of the old crones, and they just sit out their days, being respected and revered by the Dothraki as a people. But ultimately, the Dosh Khaleen are like nuns. Khal Morrow spares my life, but I'm placed into the Dosh Khaleen, never to be seen of again.
Goat?
Ram.
Think our friend got him.
Don't know anything else that can melt a ram's horn.
We're on the right path then.
Well, I had such fun tracking down Daenerys, crossing this barren landscape on 2 horses, and just feels like we're in a western.
Maybe she's flown somewhere else, somewhere far away from men like us.
I've been all over the world. There's no escaping men like us.
There's a very strong and healthy rivalry between these two characters, Jorah and Daario.
There's no escaping her, eh? Keep coming back. Why?
You know why? We both vie for Daenerys' love. He digs away at Jorah and the fact that he secured her, you know, physically.
Isn't it frustrating? Wanting someone who doesn't want you back.
Of course it is.
We are hopefully going to find Dany. I want to make sure that Jorah does understand his position. She's my lover.
You're a romantic. I admire that. Sometimes I look at you and I think, so that's what I'll be like when I grow old.
It's quite a complex relationship, but we both share the same goal, which is her survival.
I want to see what the world looks like when she's done conquering it.
So do I.
I know I should have come sooner. I should have executed all of them. I should have pulled down the sept onto the High Sparrow's head before I let them do that to you. As you would have for me.
Obviously, she's pretty angry about the High Sparrow. I think there's that. I think the fact that, of course, the walk of shame that happened to her, she never thought anything like that would ever befall her, and that she could always be on top.
Cersei suddenly is almost a shadow of her former self. I mean, there's nothing worse than when people you love are in pain and hurting.
And so I think we sort of meet a slightly broken Cersei, and she has a strange forgiveness for him very early on this season.
I didn't want to lose you again.
I understand.
Tommen is extremely vulnerable, and on top of everything else, the world has changed. The pressure is intense.
She just feels, out of control, which for her is the worst feeling.
You raised me to be strong. And I wasn't, but I want to be. Help me.
Always. She needs to believe something in all this, but it's a grasp at kind of holding on to a bit of sanity for her, I think.
What's your name?
For Jaqen, I think he does take a special interest in Arya, but to him it doesn't really matter who you were in real life. As soon as you enter the House of Black and White, you're under the system of the Faceless Man. So it's just another test to see how she will deal with this.
What's your name?
No one.
I don't believe that.
He blinded her in the first place, so it's part of the game. But he thinks he's taught her a lesson, and he wants to give her another chance, and she has to go through all the tests to become the perfect Faceless Man.
Who are you?
No one.
If a girl says her name, the man will give her eyes back.
A girl has no name.
He's glad to see that the training's working and that she overcomes certain things that were problems at the beginning of the training. So she wouldn't give up her name or her personality, and she didn't quite understand what he wanted of her at first. And so this is going better and better now.
Leave it. A girl is not a beggar anymore.
What should we do while we wait? To pass the time, what should we do? What should we talk about?
It's incredibly awkward. Tyrion is known for his ability to talk and to converse and be charming. And he's faced with two people who are just there to do a job and don't really speak unless spoken to.
You two, you spend a great deal of time together. What would you be talking about if I weren't here?
Patrol. Tyrion is very different to, I think, anything that Grey Worm's really experienced. His understanding of, Lannisters and Starks is a bit of a head fuck for him.
A wise man once said, the true history of the world is a history of great conversations in elegant rooms.
Who said this?
Me. Just now.
She's not impressed with Tyrion at all. She thinks he's a drunk. She's just very unapproving.
I mean, Grey Worm is a hard nut to crack, but Missandei's a bit easier. I did save her life at the end of season 5, so I have that advantage.
He's a foreigner, and I think, because of his background, I guess, there's a little bit of distrust.
This show deals a lot with outsiders, so whether they are for him or against him, he has good intentions.
So we will fight the masters?
Possibly.
Possibly.
It's a conversation.
Loris is in a very bad place. He's been in solitary confinement for a long time. He's kind of taken this downward spiral, and he's definitely a changed man.
You are the future of our house, the future of our family.
I don't care about that.
Obviously, we've seen other characters on Thrones go through similar experiences, and I think Finn does a fantastic job of breaking down one of the best knights in Westeros into a man that has been systematically tortured mentally and physically.
They want me to help tear you down. That's why he's letting me see you. I know it is.
Loris has been underneath the Sparrow's command for quite some time now. He just wants to do anything he can to get out of that cell and to stop being tortured.
If either of us give in to what they want, then they win.
Let them win. Just make it stop.
I don't think Marjorie feels responsible for Loris being in prison. I think she feels a sense of responsibility to get him out. But what good is being queen if she can't get herself out of incarceration and her brother out of incarceration?
For Daenerys, for my character, it was just one of those like, not since season 1 have we had an opportunity to do something like this. The idea of what she does in Phase Dothrak, it's something she's been thinking of the entirety of season 6, but it's only when she sees Jorah and Dario that she knows that she can actually go through this, because there will be someone at the other side.
We will never get out of Phase Dothrak alive.
All we can do is try.
We can do more than that. And you're going to help me.
So her plan is for Jorah and myself to take down the guards and wait for the big meeting between her and the leading Khals, which I don't completely have faith in, you know. I've never seen her walk out of fire.
She has a beautiful speech telling them everything that she believes in, and then she calmly, coolly knocks over the fires and sets them all alight. Each time she pushes over a new pyre, she gets more confidence.
For Jorah, the sequence mirrors the first time that she steps into the pyre that Khal Drogo was burned on. And of course, he starts to understand that she's going to survive the fire. The Dothraki, once again, that witness it, just fall on their knees and see this extraordinary goddess.
Seeing her walk out of the burning temple, it blows him away.
The rebirth of walking through the fire again as a way of like proving not only to those around her that she is exactly who she says she is and they deserve to bow down towards her, but also for herself. And I think that proof of knowing that she doesn't need the dragons to be the leader and the warrior that she is exactly what makes her the kind of character who could sit on the Iron Throne.
I banished you. Twice. You came back. Twice. And you saved my life.
Jorah, he knows that grayscale is fatal, and it's just going to get worse.
And so the moment in the series where she was probably most likely to touch me, I have to retreat.
Daenerys doesn't know what she's going to do with him and the conversation that's going to be had. But then before they can get anywhere, he shows her that. And I think that cuts to the core of the matter, which is that she loves him. And she does need him.
Is there a cure?
I don't know.
How long does it take?
I don't know that either. I've seen what happens when it goes far enough. I'll end things before that.
Jorah being Jorah is keeping it to himself and sacrificing himself in a sense for her, but he's not seeking a cure for himself because his primary motive is to try and save her.
She knows that he's doing the best for her by walking away. But then she kind of one-ups him by saying,
You swore to obey my commands for the rest of your life. Well, I command you to heal yourself and then return to me.
In that moment, he knows that she's given him the biggest gift that she could ever give him, which is to have a purpose, and that purpose is to serve her still.
That's going to motivate him whether he finds it or not, but she's wise enough and loving enough to know that that's what Jorah needs to move forward.
Hold the door!
When I got the script for season 6, although I had the call, I knew what was going to happen to Hodor. It was a really difficult scene to read because he's a lovable character. I love Hodor. I love him to death. Especially, I had sort of illusions that Hodor was going to become some sort of king, or But I like that he sacrificed himself for his friends. Feels very true to Hodor for me.
Oh, it's mortifying. It's so sad. He's one of the only characters in Game of Thrones who genuinely doesn't have an agenda of any kind. I mean, at all. He's just Hodor. So to have him then killed is just the ultimate sort of twisting of the knife. And it really is these good, kind characters who deserve nothing like that, and who have been through a horrible time themselves, because Hodor was just, as we know, a totally normal kid who was then sort of screwed over by Bran.
I'm just thankful I got so far with so many people dying every year. I think I did quite well to get to season 6. Hodor.
Sorry to interrupt. We're here for Queen Marjorie and Sir Loras Tyrell. Give them to us and we'll be on our way. I speak for King Tommen of House Baratheon, first of his name.
The gods don't recognize his authority in this matter.
You've already insulted one great house. It won't happen twice.
Jaime has this scene with the High Sparrow where he's trying to use whatever means he's used to using. And here's a guy who's like, I don't care about your money, I don't care about your power, actually I despise you for it. And that's infuriating.
Every last sparrow will die before Marjorie Tyrell walks down that street.
Jaime has an arrogance about him. And he's used to, people listening to him and getting what he wants.
To die in the service of the gods would please each and every one of us. We yearn for it.
He's a religious fanatic, and for Jaime it's very difficult to deal with because it's basically talking two different languages.
Queen Marjorie has already atoned for her sins by bringing another into the true light of the Seven. He knows if he gets the king on his side and in his thrall, as it were, then he can extend the power of the faith. And Tommen is quite susceptible to being used. He's quite gullible, and he believes what High Sparrow says.
The crown and the faith are the twin pillars upon which the world rests. Together, we will restore the Seven Kingdoms to glory.
He would love to kill the High Sparrow for what he's done, but he can't put his son at risk. He knows how much tension there is in the city and how vulnerable Tommen is and how vulnerable his sister is. It's a horrible situation, and he's just outplayed by the High Sparrow.
What did you tell your family about me?
I told them I met you in the north.
Did you tell them how far north?
Well, it wasn't a very large piece of parchment.
The most exciting part of the season for me is definitely meeting the family, because they're featured so much in Sam's psyche, and everything that Sam said, everything Sam's thought, everything Sam's acted upon is justified when you see the chemistry between those 5 people.
This is Gilly.
You are lovely. Going to Hornhill is really interesting for her. She's sort of like a character in a fairy tale. It's the most beautiful place she's ever been to in her life, and it's beyond anything she could even imagine.
You wanting a bath after all that travel? I want a dress for dinner.
Sam arrived with absolutely no shred of self-esteem or self-belief at all, because he had a very warmongering father who was very, very keen on physical prowess and very military-minded, and Sam was always very bookish, of course.
managed to stay soft and fat. Your nose buried in books.
It's very upsetting for Gilly to see Sam mistreated by his father.
In that moment, you can almost see all of the progress that Sam's made being undone.
Spending your life reading about the achievements of better men. I'll wager you still can't sit a horse.
She's really hoping he's going to stand up for himself. But when she sees that he doesn't, she just decides she's had enough.
He risked his own life to save mine more than once. He's a greater warrior than either of you will ever be.
Randall really thinks he's sort of terrifying, but my father was 1,000 times scarier, and White Walkers are 1,000 times scarier than you, and you're not going to intimidate me.
Did you come to meet my son?
The Night's Watch came to our keep.
Where? Gilly?
North of the wall.
It was the first time I really understood Gilly as a wildling, that kind of real pride that you see in characters like Ygritte and Tormund.
The Seven Kingdoms have waged war against these savages for centuries, and here I sit, hosting one in my hall. Thanks to my son.
When you see Sam at the dinner table and he's trying to block everything out, that's the Sam that Randall knows. And when he takes Gilly back out and says we're leaving, that's the Sam that the viewers have come to know.
Get your things.
I don't have any things. What are you doing?
We belong together. All of us.
Sam was thinking that maybe it's better to be together sometimes. Even if you're not 100% safe, at least you're not safe together.
That's your father's sword. Won't he come for it?
He can bloody well try.
But this isn't what we agreed to. These aren't White Walkers. This isn't an army of the dead. This isn't our fight.
When this idea of taking Winterfell comes up, I know immediately that this is going to be a hard sell. It's hard to ask your people to go to a war you probably won't win when you just lost like 95% of your total population. And now suddenly we are a part of a much larger political picture.
The Boltons, the Karstarks, the Umbers, they know you're here. They know that more than half of you are women and children. After they finish with me, they'll come for you.
We're aware of Ramsay's numbers and how battle-hardened they are and how prepared they are for war, and we aren't. Our gang is a kind of ragtag group of ne'er-do-wells, certainly not a cohesive force by any means.
The free folk, they are more simple to talk about politics in Westeros with these southern twats. It doesn't help much. It's more like if somebody sacrificed their life for you, then you have something going on.
If it weren't for him, none of us would be here. All of you would be meat in the Night King's army, and I'd be a pile of charred bones just like Mance.
So I have to get down to the deep emotions and point out what Jon has done for us. He almost sacrificed his life for us in Hardhome, and now they killed him because he did that. And if he hadn't, we would all be dead.
In a sense, we kind of already know that we're going to be severely outnumbered. Probably don't have a chance. But the right thing has to be done.
No.
Do I have to beg you? Do it. Do it.
The hound's just left there on his own up in the mountains. There might be a bit of shock because, you know, I thought he was dead. But then I'm sure there'll be a few that are going, I knew it! I knew it! You know, the hound's quite hard to kill.
When I found you, I thought you'd been dead for days.
I was going to give you a proper burial and then you coughed. Nearly shit myself.
I'm like a leader of this sort of group of people who don't believe in violence anymore. So obviously I'm not going to last more than one episode, which...
There's a reason you're still here.
There's a reason I'm a big fucker and I'm tough to kill.
No reason. Gods aren't done with you yet.
My character, it's in there to highlight maybe some kind of change for the Hound.
The hound's just been told so many times that there is a reason you're still alive. And he has been listening and he likes this Ray, but he's still looking for direction, I think.
Oh, there's plenty of pious sons of bitches who think they know the word of God or gods. I don't. I don't even know their real names.
That's the principle of what my character is. There's something greater than any of us, whether it be God. It doesn't matter, just as long as you know that you're not the top of the food chain. And have a little humility now and again.
I reckoned you were gonna die by the time I loaded you on the wagon, but you didn't. What kept you going?
Hate. Just that one word, hate. But I don't think the Hound, he's full of hate as he was. I think Santa Clegane is starting off with a little bit of peace, actually. I'm sure that could change like that, though. You know, especially if he hasn't had breakfast or something.
I was wrong, I admit it.
That changes nothing.
The Unsullied could mount a defense off the beachhead if the slavers'
No
forces...
more talking from you. Your talking gave us this.
I messed up because it didn't work. And the slavers' greed has gotten the best of them. I gave them some and they wanted it all.
It's like when you leave your kids at home and you're like, whatever you do, guys, don't have a party. And they're like, sure, Mum, whatever, we won't have a party, it's gonna be fine. And then you get back and lo and behold, the little shits had a party and ruined everything and just left it in a big old mess. So I return and there's a war happening, which doesn't leave Daenerys best pleased.
So imagine yourself a decent person. You've massacred my family, kept me in a cell for years, stolen our lands. I'll remind you that our houses are at war.
He has the Lannister army, but he also knows that it can take a long time to break down that castle, and a lot of people are gonna die. As he says to Edmure,
The Blackfish is an old man. A good death is all he can hope for.
And there's nothing more that Jaime would love to do than to give him just that.
You have a child now, I've heard. A son I've never met. Born of a wife that I haven't seen since our first night together. You should be with them both.
Based on his own experience, he knows that people have a weakness for, whoever they love and for their family.
You don't matter to me, Lord Edmure. Your son doesn't matter to me. Only Cersei. And if I have to slaughter every Tully who ever lived to get it back to her, that's what I'll do.
If you can threaten that and make it believable, then you can achieve quite a lot.
I demand entry.
I know the way his mind works. I know how he likes to hurt people. Did it ever once occur to you that I might have some insight?
I think Jon's fault this year is he doesn't listen to Sansa.
She's probably had the worst time of any character on this show. And the fact that she'd been Ramsay's prisoner for God knows how long, and yet they won't listen to her, maybe because she's just seen as that young, little, incompetent sister that he'd always had, but she knows how the game works now.
It's because every time he tries to, she doesn't give him a real answer. Yes, you know him, what's your solution? She says, I don't know, but you should be doing this.
She wants what he wants, and he's formed this plan, and on paper it sounds great, but they don't have the numbers.
I always wanted to do a scene with Jon Snow, because in so many ways they're so similar, but the antithesis of each other. So it's really nice to get to sort of have the two bastards there together.
Run to your brother. The sooner you make it to him, the sooner you get to see him again. Ready? Go.
Ramsay's weapon all the way through is antagonizing people, drawing them into a trap. It's like a tunnel web spider or something. And Jon completely falls for it.
He's kind of thought, this guy's going to do something stupid and honourable because he's not going to be able to control himself. So I'll shoot his brother with an arrow. But he's waited until the perfect opportunity so that Jon Snow is within Archer's range, which will then make his army run forward. and then bring them all into this perfect position where they can just all be slaughtered.
Jon isn't a great leader in that battle, and he can galvanise people to follow him. Tacticianly, he loses his temper and control.
I like the way that he's left as a sort of Napoleon-esque figure on the mountain with his generals, watching it all unfold.
Never really seen Jon give up on anyone or anything. And that was the difference in this battle. And the difference for me after coming back to life was, what if he just stops? What if the fatigue gets to him? And the first moment we found that was when the crush starts happening, and he just slows down, and he's lying on the ground, and it's that thing of finding peace for a moment. I could just stay here, I could let it all end. And then something drives him to fight up. And that moment where it comes up and he gasps for breath, he's reborn again in a way, which I found weirdly reflective of the moment of Dany being held aloft at the end of season 3.
It was actually a very good plan, I thought. We even had a plan for the giant one, massive long pikes to poke him down. Yeah, but unfortunately the riders came in and ruined the party for Ramsay.
I think for her emotionally, it's a big thing just because this is the first time that she's actually been able to step up and do the dirty work herself.
Their army's gone.
Our army's gone.
We have Winterfell. They don't have the men for a siege. All we have to do is wait.
It's a funny thing, and it's something that we discussed a lot, of how Ramsay feels and does he think he's lost. He kind of knows he's buggered, but he's in Winterfell, so he's okay. We were toying that idea of Hitler in his bunker in the last days and how you start losing sight of the actual reality because you've gone too far into it. And even when Jon Snow's beating the shit out of him, he's just smiling and just going, this is great.
I actually did punch Ewan in the face twice by accident, which he took really well. He was really nice about it. So I had to buy him a pint after that one.
That was good. Jaw hurt a bit the next day, but you know, it's understandable.
It's a horrible moment when you see your hero go a bit too far. The audience should feel, yes, Ramsay's getting what he deserves. He's still getting what he deserves. This is, okay, stop. Could you stop now? You go from hating the person that's being punched, and then something should slightly turn into, oh, this is my hero becoming a monster.
Our time together is about to come to an end.
It's amazing. It's Sansa's first kill. And it's just such a strong moment for her because all her life she's been affected by these men who have just done such terrible things to her. And she's always carried it with her, and this is the first moment that you actually hear her say,
"Your words will disappear. Your name will disappear. All memory of you will disappear."
I did ask for a dragon-related death. But it's fine, dogs is alright. But in terms of story, it's a really wonderful way to end, so that Sansa has the power.
We want the Iron Islands back, basically. That's all we want. We don't want the Seven Kingdoms, we just want what's rightfully ours.
This is the lovely thing about where Daenerys is now at. She gets to meet much more of her peers. She sees people who are in a similar place of power, who have been born into a strong family. But the simplicity of what the Greyjoys want is just that they want their land, and they want to be the new generation who's coming into rule. And that's something that Daenerys understands and loves.
And that's all. We'd like you to help us murder an uncle or two who don't think a woman's fit to rule.
Reasonable.
This is sort of like, if this doesn't work out, what are we going to do? I really can't undermine myself by being too anxious, but also the stakes are huge. And yet I think Daenerys and Yara quite like the cut of each other's jib.
There's like a little kind of like, oh, there's another badass chick in the place, okay.
Euron's offer is also an offer of marriage. You see, you won't get one without the other.
And I imagine your offer is free of any marriage demands.
I never demand, but I'm up for anything, really.
There's mild flirtation, which is exciting to say the least. I mean, get rid of Dario, bring on the ladies. Why not?
We're two strong women who've had very evil fathers, and I think we just want what's rightfully ours, and I think she respects that. And in return, we will respect what she wants and change our ways so that we can work together. It was a sort of an entente cordiale, if you like.
As the seasons go on, it's nice to still be a part of the show, as not many characters make it. Upon reading my storyline this year, I was really excited. It's something that we don't see, but when Arya arrives back in Westeros, she's out of touch with where people are. She's been out of touch for a really, really long time, but if there's one person on her list that she is 95% sure where they'll be, it's Walder Frey.
For House Frey!
She decides to go with the twins, and then in that scene that I'm dressed for now, so it's not Arya's usual look, when Arya kills Walder Frey, she thinks it's very important for him to know exactly who she is. My name is Arya Stark. I want you to know that. The last thing you're ever going to see is a Stark smiling down at you as you die. It's the most unexpected family in Walder Frey's eyes that would come for him. He has done a lot wrong, but he's so confident that he's safe. And Walder Frey is such an evil, evil character. She doesn't need to explain why. He's fully aware of why she's doing it. Although Arya wouldn't know that her mother's throat was cut, she does the same deed, which, you know, for a story point of view, it's very, very cool. One thing we can take away from this series after watching Arya's storyline is that she's definitely back.
I'm having the Lord's Chamber prepared for you. You're the Lady of Winterfell. You deserve it.
You should take it.
I'm not a Stark. Thrones is really at the heart of it, about dysfunctional families.
There's always been tension between them because since they were little, Sansa has always looked up to her mother and always just taken on her mother's views of everything. And her mother really didn't like Jon because of the whole affair thing. It doesn't mean that they don't love each other, but it's just, you know, typical sibling tension.
We need to trust each other. We can't fight a war amongst ourselves. We have so many enemies now. I think Jon is oblivious. He hasn't actually learned his lesson from trying to pay attention to what she's feeling. He says he has, but he's asking her to trust him. He's not listening and watching and observing her. I think that could be a real problem for him.
I don't care if he's a bastard. Ned Stark's blood runs through his veins. He's my king, from this day until his last day.
Jon is the right man for the job. We all want a leader who's going to be decent and honourable. And I think he's definitely entitled to be running Winterfell, although Sansa might have a problem with that, I fear. Her relationship with Jon Snow, I think, is an indication of what's going to come. And I'm not sure it's going to be pretty.
The King in the North! The King in the North!
He's named King in the North and she kind of gets no credit for it. Jon doesn't acknowledge everything his sister has done for him after all that they've been through. And it's not that she's looking for praise or anything. She did it because she wants revenge and also because she wants her home back. But Jon, he's so naive. So Sansa's just a little bit agitated is all.
When you blow up a huge number of cast members in a single moment, you don't want it to be completely random. You know, it feels like it's got to be earned, and it feels like it's got to be something that belongs to the world.
At this point in the story, we try to introduce as few new elements as possible. You're trying to play with the pieces that we've got on the board, and of realizing that the wildfire was something that we had.
Going back to earlier seasons and going back to the books, we've known for quite some time that the Mad King had planted caches of wildfire throughout the city. And when Jaime is telling Brienne the story of the last moments of the Mad King, he tells her that the wildfire was planted below major boulevards, and he actually says below the Sept of Baelor.
I just couldn't have seen all of that. You know, I knew there was revenge to be had, obviously, from last year, but I'm still like, this is crazy.
I got a phone call from Dan and David, and they said, hey, dude. And that was enough. I knew right then and there.
It's like a slow burn. You basically start the sequence with a whole different bunch of people with a whole different bunch of expectations as they get ready for work one day, and they go to work, and then work becomes something completely different.
Each one of the images was very carefully designed to flow into the next image that followed it. It was such a powerful way into this scenario, one that really shies away from giving away what's going to happen.
Marjorie's carved a career out of being occasionally one step ahead and occasionally one step behind Cersei.
There's something wrong.
And the two ladies have battled quite evenly for this time. And what we obviously find out is that Marjorie's demise in being beaten was not her fault. It's down to the High Sparrow underestimating Cersei.
You have nothing to fear, Your Grace. The trial will begin shortly. He's just become overconfident. What he's doing is in the forefront of his mind, and he doesn't really suspect that anyone's going to undermine him.
The ultimate dramatic moment in that sequence is when Marjorie turns to the High Sparrow. You end on a big close-up of Jonathan Pryce's face, who is so expressive and can say so many things with so little, and you can see just the second before the whole place blows up that he goes, oh shit.
We have yet another awesome scene in the set filled with extras in a very grandiose, ceremonial situation, and for once I'm not getting married.
Let me through. Let me through.
We filled the set with 287 extras and a light source and these big kind of things, air movers they're called, that kind of do these gusts of air, and we would do a timing. We would go in 3, 2, 1, go! And then everybody fell back. So that was as close to exploding as we got, but a majority of it, 99% of it, will all be visual effects.
We get storyboards from the director, and then we go into previs and we work out cameras and animations. Then we have a good animatic version of that final shot, so we know first how to shoot it and B, what it's going to look like. Obviously, it looks like a video game, but we know what we're going for and how we want it to look at the end of the day.
We see it from the inside. When we come outside, we see the windows getting blown out, and then we see it, of course, from Cersei's and Tommen's POV.
It needed many iterations in previs to get the beats of it right, so that Dan and David felt like it was emotional enough, it was big, but also it didn't get so big that we lost our main characters in it.
We don't have an exterior set. It's always been a combination of found locations and CGI. So we knew that the exterior of blowing up the set would be something that would have to be completely generated by visual effects. We knew, however, we would want some elements.
Action!
It's lit underneath. We made lighting trays underneath that had a UV LED strip system. And in the puddle itself is a high fluorescent pigment. When you're lighting from underneath, it's glowing already. Then with light from above as well, you've got the additional, and that's what gives it that real high fluorescence.
It's like this pure enjoyment of wiping out all of them.
She has a plan. She executes that plan flawlessly, apart from one major wrinkle. The very person that she wanted to protect most in the world is lost as a direct result of her actions.
Show me.
What we were trying to do in the scene is to show that something dying inside her. The prophecy has come true. She's seen all of her children die. The thing that kept her going for so long is gone.
She's been through so much and she's so hardened that she's not even capable of mourning him. The next step is that she's going to take that throne.
Now you have this woman who, I don't know if it's crazed, I think it's just empty, which is probably more dangerous.
She finally gets her heart's desire, the Iron Throne, At the same time, she's lost almost everything that she cared about to get it. And there's that look between her and Jamie, which is enigmatic and which hints at season 7 drama to unfold. But she is, at the end of season 6, colder and stronger and Queen of the Seven Kingdoms.
Long may she reign. Long may she reign.
It's tough, you know, it's like the Red Wedding. It's tough to say goodbye to a lot of actors that we've been working with for quite some time. Whether the ones that we've been with since season 2 or, you know, Jonathan Pryce, who just came to us last year, but has become one of our favorite actors so quickly.
I hope it's not a waste that I've learned all 500 names of everybody I've worked with. It is a great, great production to be involved in.
I won't be able to say thank you to all of you, but I've had a wonderful, wonderful time. Thank you. Thanks.
It's been very personal, which the best ones are, I think. So I'll miss Lancel. I'll miss him a lot.
Once you've been a part of the circus and the madness and the joy that is Thrones, you are always a member of the family. The rose has been uprooted.